Hello, everyone, and you welcome another appointment with POP, Progress Over Perfection. Today, we go to Italy, in Rome, where I'm going to talk with Federica Latta. Federica Latta is a psychologist, and she worked in US, in many places in US. Very interesting. And now she is in Rome. Hello, Federica. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you to be here today. We're going to talk about something very interesting because it's about bicultural couples. That is very interesting because, especially for me, because I live in Australia and there's a lot of bicultural, interracial couples. Can you ask you a little bit about your background, your studying, and a little bit about you, and we can talk about couples?
Yes. So I'm Italian and I went to the US with a 1 year program, a 1 year exchange program in college. And then I decided to go back with a scholarship. And what was supposed to be 1 year became almost 20 years. And in 2012, I came back to Italy and I work a lot with expats, either Italians that lived abroad and are now back in Italy, or expats that live in Rome. And a lot of couples in which one partner is Italian and the other partner is not Italian. So
No.
it's not just bicultural, but also often bilingual.
Nice. Even your partner is come from another place and is not Italian, so you are both bicultural. You live in a bicultural situation, but
Absolutely.
you have an idea about what is bicultural. So, can you tell me a bit more about what is bicultural?
Bicultural means two partners that grew up in either different countries, or in which often they have spent significant time in a different country, in a different culture, and so they bring to the couple two different systems, right? Two different way of seeing life, and share a different difference in shared values and rituals at times.
But what you're saying to me is as well that bicultural sometimes is even in the people in the country. Can you explain a bit more about this concept?
Yes, because I do believe that every family is a cultural entity that has different ritual values and goals. So even when two people are raised in the same village, often raised in families that have different ways of expressing emotions, for example, or different ways to deal with conflict. So even when you have two people that were raised in the same village, you are dealing with differences. And so some sort of translation often is required.
Mm. Can I ask you how cultural differences around conflict communication and emotional expression show up in your room?
So often what happens is that a couple that is bicultural needs to decide at one point where they want to live, and often where they want to raise their children. So very often this is the question that creates some friction and that lands them in couples therapy. At times in the first session I ask, okay, so you're here in Italy, how did you decide to live in Italy? And already that question provides a lot of information to me. The answer provides a lot of information because it is very important to see how they came to that decision, if it's a shared decision, and whether they acknowledge the decision process, whether they are able to talk about things that work and things that don't work. So often that is what takes them to therapy.
You were talking earlier about these two ways to talk. I know the one more expressive and less expressive. Can you explain properly what is this concept?
Right. Like, yes, because even within the same culture, there are different family identities and different ways of being. And I came across an article that was talking about the differences of ask culture and guess culture. So people that were raised in a ask culture tend to ask direct questions and give direct answers. So, for example, they tend to have no problem asking, can I borrow your jacket? Or I'm going to be in town next week. Can I stay at your place? Can I sleep at your place? They do so because they assume that the other person can say yes if they want, or they can say no if they don't want. And so they feel they feel the freedom to ask that, confident that the answer will be a sincere answer. People that are raised in a more guess culture do not feel comfortable asking direct questions because they don't feel comfortable answering in a direct manner. People that are raised in guess culture consider very rude to say no to people. So when they are asked, can I borrow your jacket? The only possible answer is yes, you can. So they feel it's quite rude to invite themselves into people's home, and they use a more indirect way of communicating. So for example, they would say something like, I'm going to be in town and I really don't know where I could sleep. Do you have any suggestion for an accommodation? So they hint, hoping that you would understand and you would offer. And that leaves you the freedom, right, to the other person to either invite or not invite without putting the person in an uncomfortable spot. So this is true also within a country. Like you can have people from very different with very different approaches to this.
Absolutely. I was saying earlier about when you were talking about these things about me, my partner, me, especially the English Australians. And then there's other, for example, the Asian, very, very polite, Japanese or Chinese, very polite. Chinese are more direct, Japanese are more reserved people. But I can see this different. For example, as Italian, I'm very direct. Sometimes I shouldn't. Sometimes I shouldn't. Where others, maybe they are more polite. Sometimes I struggle to understand what they want because they're not direct. What I learned from, for example, with my wife, to understand where that maybe I can be less direct and she can be more direct with me. And we learn to balance these things. I see this many times. I think I'm going to use it in my therapy now. Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, and what you're doing is great, because instead of a polarization that often happens in couples and brings a lot of conflict, right? A polarization in which each partner becomes more and more entrenched in their own position. Like then it becomes really a judgment of who is right and who is wrong. In your case, what you are describing is that you understand that there is value in the other approach and you try to integrate that. And this is what makes differences an enrichment for, a cultural difference, but also like a family difference. It can be used to enrich the way we navigate the world.
How do you teach or coach bicultural couple to understand each other's words?
So the first thing is to validate. I think the validation is very important, which is to recognize that there is value and without judgment, because it's not really a matter of whose approach or whose culture is better or who is right and who is wrong. I think it's important to acknowledge that there are different approaches and they have advantages and disadvantages, of course. So I start by validating without judgment. And then I think it's very important to facilitate communication and to make sure that both partners feel safe communicating what they feel, what they would like, what they are worried about. I think that that is very important. So it becomes a dialogue in which they share their visions and their fear, and in a way that feels respectful for the other person, without assuming that the other person is exactly the way that functions exactly the way you function. So, for example, I was working with a couple. This is an example. Was working with a couple, and he was quite upset at the children at a dinner table because the children were not behaving in a way that respected the etiquette, let's say. And so he was very concerned about that and was trying to make sure that the kids behaved more properly. And she was quite upset at this. And when we talked about it, it came out that she grew up in a family in which there was not a lot of communication about emotional issues. So for her, it was really important to provide their kids, with this emotionally safe environment. So dinner for her was an opportunity to be relaxed and to let the kids talk and ask questions and make it really welcoming. While for him, he was really worried that the kids would not learn a proper behavior and they would be maybe judged by peers or by other families, and they would be considered not good children. And so he was very worried about that. So you can see that, at the dinner table, they had very different visions of how, and that came from very different worries and very different fears. So the moment they could understand, okay, she's upset when I interrupt the conversation at dinner to correct the behavior of the children, and right, because she's afraid that this is going to happen. And when she realized, okay, he's afraid that our children are not going to be well mannered and they're going to suffer the consequences, maybe being rejected by other people because of that, then they could really understand each other and understand that there's value in both perspectives.
It's fascinating. At the end of the day, bicultural couples have the same problem as no bicultural couple have, because anyway, as you said earlier, doesn't matter where we're from, we are all different. Even in the family, we grew up with two different type of parents, brothers and sisters. They are different, culturally different. It's not only because they grew up in a different environment with friends and different beliefs, so they experience different things. And the work that you do is important, because when you are able to stop the people and think about what is good in the other approach, and discuss what is good in both approach, what we can use together to make it fun for
Yes.
to play, and at the same time to teach them how to be assertive in certain places.
Absolutely. I think that this is really crucial, that every approach has advantages and disadvantages. And I think I think that bicultural couples face the same issues. Of course, there are other issues, like I said, like they need to decide where they want to live and where, which language is going to be the dominant language, and in which country they want to raise their children. And they need to acknowledge that there are cultural differences, not just the guest culture and the us culture, but more collectivistic societies are different from more individualistic societies. For example, I was working with a couple in which one partner is Italian, the other partner is from Northern Europe, and they were moving to the house that belongs to the parents from Northern Europe. And the Italian partner was really surprised that they were expected and requested to pay rent, because this is something that in Italy is considered quite unusual, to pay rent to your in-laws.
To your parents. You don't
Yeah,
pay. Because anyway, you're going to take care of your parents at one point. Yeah,
right.
this is the difference between a culture that uh,
Right.
is a multi-family and the one that is not. What are the most important thing bicultural couples need to understand about each other that we don't talk about enough?
I think that in general, communication becomes really important here, and also figuring out that the person that is your partner does not function in the way you function, and not to be expecting to understand everything, but as Gottman says, to stay curious instead of getting furious, right? That's something that is really important, to stay open and try to figure out, and to be really willing to learn more. After all, you chose that person. And to me, it's like, okay, you chose this person, right? Yes, you could have saved some of these problems by marrying somebody from your village. Then you wouldn't have to worry about where, in which country to live. But somehow you picked somebody from a different culture, and there are disadvantages to that, and there are advantages. And so I think it is really important to focus on how you can learn new things and the enrichment that comes with it.
Can you tell us a success story of your clients where they came in with a problem, with a bicultural problem, and they left happy ever after?
So I was working with a couple. Male partner is Italian and the female partner from the US. And she is a very independent woman that came from the US and built her own life in Italy, also non-white. So coming to a very different continent, a different country with a different language, into a country where there's not as much cultural diversity as you can find in the US. So very independent, strong woman, and fell in love with an Italian man that had never left Italy, and lived in the same apartment building complex where his parents live. And so it was really at times challenging to navigate this, because she was used to not having her family being so involved, like, it was his family. They were telling me that at times when they had a fight, because all couples fight, we know that it's normal, it's a normal physiological process in couples. Sometimes when they were fighting, um, his parents would hear it from the apartment, from the shared walls, and would call them up and say, "Is everything okay? Can we do something? Can we help?" And she found that um, at times annoying, at times obnoxious, and at times endearing, right? So it was really difficult at the beginning to navigate all the situations with the in-laws and with the different country. And then this became an ongoing discussion between, what do you want to do with your future? And I think that these discussions in the end were very helpful. And what happened was that then she found a little bit of the family that she didn't know she needed, right, in his family. And he got the courage to explore more, to improve his English, to make a career for himself. And then they decided to move, not only to move from that building, which was quite a process, but also to move to a different country to look for better opportunities for his career. So this was quite a journey.
Wow. Love can really move mountains.
Right. And they found a way, like he became more courageous because he was inspired by her independence, right? And she became more relational because she was inspired by, his family.
Beautiful. Look, Federica, we are at the end of these first interviews about bicultural couples. I think it was fantastic. Thank you so much. If someone want to work with you, where they find you?
My website, www.federicalatta.com. You will find all the information.
Beautiful. I'm going to leave the website in the description. Now, we are going to talk very soon, me and you, because the next interview is about patriarchy in relationship. So people, if you are interested about this one, let's catch up at the next episode of Progress Over Perfection with Federica Latta and patriarchy in relationship. Ciao!